First of all, a huge, huge round of applause for Debra, who is doing her third session of the day. And is still game for everything we throw at her. Thank you very, very much. One of the things that I always try to do in my programming at this festival is to have tons and tons of sessions on the art of Rajasthan. We are a Rajasthani festival. We are here in Jaipur. And I always worry that we don't have enough Rajasthani sessions. But today we've had two. Debra earlier reminded us of the utter brilliance and beauty of the late painting in Jaipur of the period of Raja Man Singh. These astonishingly abstract and beautiful images of Nat yogic concepts which defy precedent and are so astonishingly inventive and modern. Today we're going to go into an astonishingly different world. You really couldn't imagine anything more different from the Man Singh pictures than the royal pictures of Udaipur. But it is again a measure of the astonishing diversity and inventiveness of this state that we're in, Rajasthan, that within a few 100 miles you can move from one complete artistic world to a completely different one, or one not completely different, but one which is distinct and unique to itself in so many ways. This was Debra's most recent exhibition in a career of producing astonishing shows, but this is, I think, one of my favorite. And the catalogue, which, is it available here? Is it for sale, the catalogue?
I'm very sorry, we ran out of catalogs. We didn't expect them to sell out before the festival.
They are very much available online and in other bookshops, so please, please, please go and buy a copy, because it's one of the great and most beautifully designed, and the essays in it are astonishing. I went to Udaipur last April in the heat, and it was too hot to go around much, but I just sat in the shade reading your catalogue from cover to cover, and it was wonderful. Please, a big round of applause again for the brilliant, brilliant Debra Diamond.
Thank you, William, and thank you everyone for coming. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that Udaipur and Jodhpur are different art worlds. I think that for people who are not really familiar with Rajput painting, who maybe have encountered it in museums where they just show a couple of this and a couple of that, you get the sense that they're all about Maharanas, Maharajas, Maharals, and how great they were. And what I want to show is that's not what's going on here. So let me begin. I know I have to point at a console, but I'm not sure what a console is. So today we're looking at the paintings from Udaipur. If you haven't been there, this is the city palace on Pichola Lake, one of 7 artificial lakes or tanks that were built from the 15th century forward that enabled the flourishing of a capital city, because it was all about water harvesting. And this is the way we try to evoke that in Washington, D.C. I'm just going through the exhibition here because I've actually given you the wrong PowerPoint. Okay. So I want to start by looking at this particular painting, which again is 3 or 4 feet across. So it's a large and immersive image. And I started this project because of the work of a scholar named Dipti Khera, who spoke here at JLF last year but couldn't come this year. And she did a dissertation and a book that's totally brilliant and groundbreaking on the paintings of Udaipur, and particularly on what they were meant to evoke in the hearts and minds of viewers. So what she found on the back of these paintings was that there were often inscriptions that said that this painting was about the bhav, or the mood, or the emotion of a sunrise in Udaipur, or the bhav and mood of emotion of some sort of collective memory and enterprise. So the equivalent for today would be, if you can think about being in this room or being at JLF over the course of 3 or 4 days, running into friends that you know and sitting next to them or spying them in the back row, the feeling of the breeze when you're at one of the outdoor sessions, that sense of being excited by a particular talk, and also how the light changes from day to night. So all of those things that create that collective memory that took place over an extended period of time, that's what the artists in Udaipur were trying to do. So this particular painting, when Dipti and I encountered it in the collection in Udaipur, was called Maharana Sangram Singh Hunting. Or maybe Maharana Sangram Singh Hunting a Tiger. And that's not what's going on in this painting at all. But you know, the people who first worked on the paintings in Rajasthan were usually family members. And to them, it is a portrait of a grandpa. I'm pressing it as hard as I can. I'm just trying to go forward. Wrong, I gave you the wrong PowerPoint.
Just say next.
Which is the console? I know, so I was pointing. Sorry, excuse me, I'm like technologically very primitive.
It'll be better if you can say next and they'll do it for you.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, let's go back to this painting. So what do we see happening in this painting? First of all, notice that the composition takes place, all the people that are in the painting and the landscape, all takes place around this empty center, which is the lake. There are scores of large paintings from Udaipur that all have a tank or water body in the center. And I looked really hard, but I could never find that in Western art. There was like one exception. Because water and water harvesting is so important to them. What?
Kishangar.
Yeah, but never.
The lake at Kishangar is always there, and the Kishangar paintings is a parallel, yeah.
Kishangar is fair. So this is a painting that's about the mood of Udaipur on a beautiful sunrise. When early in the morning, the king has got out, and he's gone on a boat, and he's left the city palace, and he's gone to this little square, oran, of land, triangle of land, and his son gets out, the prince, and the prince kills the tiger. There are hundreds of small figures in this painting. There are dhobis, everything that happens in the morning, right? Dhobis washing clothing, there are priests, there are people bathing, and all of those give a sense of, this is about a city, a beautiful space, the relationship between a father and a son, and between a father and his friends, who are the Thakurs, or the noblemen. Dipti and I, what do you want to say? Something amazing happened today. Dipti and I worked on this project together of the exhibition for 2 or 3 years. And she focused on paintings of the city and the palaces and Bhava. I focused on landscape and water harvesting and friendship. And we tried really very hard to figure out what to do about all the small figures of common people that are in those paintings. And we couldn't, we could talk about it as these artists unusually showed the labor that goes into making a beautiful place, a prosperous kingdom. But just today, a man came up to William and me and showed us a sketchbook by an Udaipur artist that has the names and portraits of 40 common people. So we'll be able to go back and do more work next year. Let's go next.
You've got your key now.
We have a key. So when we had the exhibition in DC, those are all the sections in the exhibition. And in each case, it's about the mood of a specific time or place, the mood of the Lake Palace, the bhav of the city, the mood of the monsoon. Okay, we can go next. These are many of the palace paintings. Let's go forward until we can get a close-up. Oh, this gives you a sense of the scale, and here is my co-curator, Dipti Kera, in the Monsoon room. So we took all of the paintings that we were able to borrow that had to do with the mood of the monsoon. And we put them in one room. And each room had a soundscape of ambient sounds created by the great filmmaker Amit Datta from Himachal Pradesh. So when you went into the monsoon room, you could hear rain and a little bit of thunder and the cries of peacocks. And the idea was to help create an immersive environment, especially for people who had never experienced a monsoon. So that set the mood. And the hope was that if you heard the sound of a peacock, in Amit Datta's soundscape, and then you saw the peacock in the monsoon, that you would begin to see it in terms of memory and of re-experiencing a particular memory. We also, because in this exhibition, water harvesting was one of the ways that we approached understanding Udaipur. We also worked hard to communicate that attitudes towards water and weather and water harvesting are culturally constructed. And that, if there's anyone here from the United States, you will know that that is a heavy lift, because people in the United States think of rain as something crappy and awful. And we had to bring them into the... Oh, I'm Britain, right? Because it rains all the time and you never know and it messes up your cricket.
It's one of those major differences.
So.
What a monsoon means to people here. And this thing when you look out and it's a grey day, people say, oh, what a gorgeous day. it's
Right. So we had the sounds, we had these big, you can see how big the paintings are. And we had this sort of giant sort of Baituk kind of couchy thing in the middle. And people would go in there and lie and chill. And I think that it's very important for everyone to understand that our attitudes towards water are culturally constructed, because we're in a moment in time in which we all have to learn how to conserve water. So that's the room, that's people chilling. We can go forward. Next, please. This just gives you a sense of the scale of the paintings. There was one painting in the exhibition, you can see it on the left, of Maharana Bhim Singh, that is your classic big portrait. That's about the king and rule. And which intriguingly has the price written right on the front. This is 32 rupees, if anyone's interested.
Just so wonderful seeing this. The design quality at the National Museum of Asian Arts consistently over the last 2 decades has been just astonishing. Every show has this incredible design quality that you put on. Is just...
This is the Bhava of the city palace. And so what we were trying to do what I was trying to do was, by putting these paintings together, was to show the cleverness and the genius and the creativity of artists who kept rearranging these architectural spaces in order to create the emotion and the memory of being there. Just remember that at the end of the session, I'm going to ask everyone to draw a picture of their experience at JLF over the last 3 days, and you see how you can do it. So different artists at different moments doing different angles. Next. A close-up. This really is about the bhav of music and devotion in the city palace. Next. Once in a while, we used photographs that also came from the City Palace collection to, again, give everyone a sense of sort of how these spaces were used to create, well, in this case, a wedding. Next. We have a large section on landscape. There's this, if you read books on Indian art history, they will always say there's no landscape traditions in Indian art. So I was very keen on showing these particular huge landscapes that are depict very specific places in ways that we couldn't immediately recognize, but in which east, west, north, and south, and the relationship between, these are like tin mines, in relationship to the city palace, are mapped with cartographic precision. So on one level, this is a hunt scene of a Maharana, but on another level, it's the hunt scene at a particular location with a particular group of friends on a particular day. And how do we know this? Because it's all written out on the back of each painting, the bhav of the emotions. We're still in, let's go forward, next. I hope it's not bad that you're seeing the exhibition. Go next. Next, we'll get a close-up. One of the things also that artists in Udaipur did was they created paintings of the heavens and the gods that look just like Udaipur. So Udaipur becomes the model for a heaven, and then that heavenly place reflects back on Udaipur. So this is a little tiny painting, really. It's like about 10 inches high. It's a depiction, it's a folio, we think, from the Saundarya Lahari, like a poem that's about the greatness and the beauty of the goddess. And they didn't illustrate the entire manuscript. They only illustrated this one painting, and they did it twice, and they put the verse on. And what is it? It's a story about the goddess who lives at the top of the universe with Shiva, who is both her beloved and her couch, according to the text, in a palace surrounded by water. So this is Udaipur architecture. It's an Udaipur lake. Anyway, it's lovely. This one we borrowed from Zurich. Next. Again, this is a source saga. So it's a poem, right, about Krishna and Radha. And this is the poem, the verse when Krishna and Radha change their clothes, right, in order to connect with each other. And it's very typical in terms of sort of earlier Udaipur painting to have bowers with these flat red backgrounds. But how do we know that they've transposed Braj and the Yamuna River into Udaipur and its lakes? It's because of all of those chatris and those water structures and the dams that are there. So it's this relocation of everything into this idyllically perfect Udaipur. And in terms of creating like worlds that are based on Udaipur, here are two 10-foot high type of pitchwai paintings on cloth that depict the heavens. And again, the heavens are based on Udaipur. So in I hope that you're very excited because you are actually seeing a working PowerPoint from our museum. Anyway, it's filled with images of Udaipur, except that it's the space in which Shiva lives. We can keep going. Next. Well, this is what it was like to install those babies. It took 8 hours to install the first one. Next. We can go forward. So I kind of made a terrible mistake by giving you the wrong PowerPoint, but I'm going to compensate by telling you a couple of the important themes that come out in these paintings. One of the things that was the most surprising to me was that paintings of the Maharanas hunting are about friendship and relationships. So in a painting of a hunt scene, it's not the Maharana who delivers the final coup de grace, kills the animal. It will be a friend. Or there are paintings that are about, there are paintings where one of the Thakurs will save an elephant. All of these paintings have been labeled portraits of Maharanas. But what happened is over the course of the 18th century, especially first during the reign of Amar Singh II, in the early 18th century, artists moved from small paintings, usually of the Ramayana or Ragamalas, to these big paintings about Udaipur, its beauties and its interrelationships. And it happens at that moment when Udaipur needs to create a new kind of government. It needs to create bonds with Thakurs, because it all has to do with the end of the Mughal Empire and that kind of both boogeyman and supporter that the Mughal emperors were to all the Rajput kings. And so they create a way of extolling their city and extolling the bonds for people. And the way that they looked at these paintings was they put them down, it's for the elites, it's for the Thakurs, they put them down on a table and they would sit around together and they would talk about the event, and then someone would write it up and put it on the back. So I think that, I think we can really sort of reevaluate the painting from Udaipur. Yes, there's a political reason that you need to create connections and bonds of affection for a particular place, but we have artists who are doing it in an extraordinarily creative way. Thank you. And thank you for bearing with that PowerPoint.
Deborah, tell me, when we were sitting here 3 days ago talking about the Pahari paintings, you and Sonia were very keen to emphasize that the paintings in the hills should not be looked from the point of view of one court, that artists were moving around, were into marrying, and that pictures were moving. There was like an art market, and so something which was built, something which was painted by one set of artists in one court could find itself in a different collection and get wrongly labeled the product. But this morning we've had one show about Jaipur. Today we're looking at the art of Udaipur. What is different between the hills and the Rajput courts of the plains of Rajasthan that allows one to be more certain that with Udaipur or Jaipur we're dealing with a coherent body of work?
Rajasthan is a pleasure because we know where the paintings were made, and then we can date them, and then we can link them to larger political and religious movements. And we are so far away from being able to do that in the Pahari Hills, with very few exceptions, like Sansar Chand, Kangra, or Sid
Pandit Sugula.
Yeah. So what's been exciting about working on Rajasthan painting for these years is that all of these courts are connected. They all know each other. There is movement of paintings back and forth. They're all connected various ways to the Mughal court or to Vaishnava Bhakti movements. But then they do extraordinarily different things. And this, in Udaipur, this practice of doing bhav, the mood, the experience, the collective memory, is unique to Udaipur, but it might be the way that we should be understanding all paintings. Those of you who know Indian aesthetics know that there's like a 2,000-year history of rasa and bhav. It was all based on how do we feel emotions from...
Could you maybe explain, because not everyone here will be familiar with the whole business of being a rasika and the notion of ras.
Guess what? India has a 2,000-year history of philosophers talking about and thinking about why is it that art moves us. They usually were working from drama and dance, but the question for them was, and I'll just do it by like modern art forms. The question is like, why would we go to a horror movie and be scared out of our wits? Like, what could the pleasure be? And they came up with many theories about understanding what you see as art, feeling it, tasting it, that's the rasika.
Tasting it, yeah.
Tasting the emotion with your body, losing a sense of time. Losing a sense of time means forgetting about all the things that you didn't do today, but connecting with the divine. And all of that is ras. So art historians, for at least during my lifetime, have spent 30 years sort of guessing like, I don't know, this must be the way they looked at paintings. But here in Udaipur, we finally know. So the bhav of being at this particular lecture right now, this talk, if you really feel it, if you really experience it, will lead you to this experience of ras, and then you'll be in bliss. And I hope that you will be in bliss.
And the aesthetics, the theory of aesthetics is centered on the rasika, the person observing or tasting. That it's the effect of that painting on the person that matters.
It is by the year 1000. Yeah. And then by 1700, when it moves into vernacular languages like Rajasthani, then there's also, there becomes a willingness to think about collective memory and collective experience.
Take me through the creation of these pictures. So we've got, living in Udaipur, how many families of artists? 1 family? 5 families? And then there's also beyond that, satellites. So the satellite courts like Devgarh, or satellite shrines like Natwara. They've got their own sets of artists. How do they all interrelate with each other?
Oh, there must have been at least 20 families of artists connected to the Udaipur court. And they are related and intermarried with the artists who are in the courts of Devgar or Natwara. And when photography comes to India the year after it's invented, the painters and the photographers are brothers, and working in the same family. So,
And what again, you were saying that we were surprised in the hills by the fact that many of the painters have the status of Brahmins and that they are reading their own texts. What are the status or the castes of the jati of the Udaipur painters?
I'm not sure how to read that in terms of caste,
Right.
but I do know what they were paid and what they did, and they're often artists. I almost have the same question about the Mughal court, what really was the status of artists at any given moment? I can tell you that in some of the paintings that we saw just now, that artists are depicted in court scenes, and they depicted themselves quite prominently, painting or attending. So they're known to the Maharanas, and they have a certain status.
Is that different from the karkhana, the factory, in a sense, in the Mughal court, where you're bringing boys, rather like the Ottomans bringing Devishme from the provinces, that star artists are coming from Kashmir, from Gujarat, from different places, and they're under an ustad, and they move with the court, and they're attached to a prince. Is that different to the fact that a place like Udaipur is stationary, and that you have the same families generation after generation producing artists? And it's done
in general.
And it's done within the family rather than in a factory.
It's done within the family, but we believe there was a space in the Udaipur court where they worked. And part of the reason we believe that, the Udaipur folks believe that happened, but we have no clear proof. But most artists wouldn't have had large enough spaces to work on those paintings. They're pretty massive. And we see artists who are not necessarily related working together. So most of the big paintings are created by 2 or 3 artists working together, who would all be paid.
From the same family?
Not necessarily.
In the palace or at home?
So we think that the palace is putting them together. That's what happens in the Mughal court.
So this is much more like the Mughal court than it is the hills, where Pandit Su and Manaku and Ninesuk, we imagine, are sitting in the same household, and the women are burnishing the paper and helping prepare the brushes and the pigments.
Yes, but we should also remember that Nansuk's family was training non-family members to paint, because we have the one instance of Sajnu,
Right.
to whom they're not related, who took their style,
Not as well as them. Not as well as them.
Different. It's a mannerist turn. I'm telling you, Sajnu is like Panturmo or El Greco. You have to look at him playing. It's I reject all that pretty stuff. So I'm going to make a case for Sajnu. I'll just remember that name.
I have a lovely Ganesh by Sajnu, an orange Ganesh. It's the most beautiful thing, eating his sweeties.
It is. It's a decadent art world insiders painting.
So also, another thing that struck me in what you just showed me is how many of these pictures, rather like the ones we were looking at this morning, are big pictures. Now, when we're talking at the Mughal court, quite often, BNG always taught us to think of how these things are received, that they're not on the wall like they are in the exhibition, they're kept in an album, and they're passed around a group of people that like paintings. There's a source of light, they're holding it in their hands, and they're admiring these pictures, and it's something you do after dinner maybe, or it's an entertainment in itself, and like-minded aesthetes meet together and pass it from hand to hand. Now, these big paintings are not clearly due to be held. Are they designed to be stuck on a wall like you would show in your exhibition, or how is one viewing these paintings?
We think we have little bits of evidence that will be boring to go through, but we think they put them down. The king sat with the Thakurs, with the noblemen, They remembered what they did together, who was the hero of the day, how Sardar Singh saved the elephant, etc. A scribe wrote them down and then put it on the back of the painting. And then they were put away, as far as we know.
And while we saw some of these images very much have religious themes, a great majority of the pictures one sees in Udaipur are quite secular. They're court pictures. They're pictures of the king going hunting, or the king going out on the lake, or him enjoying his family or his ladies. Why were religious themes less important in Udaipur than in some courts?
Can I reverse that? What I want to say is that the big paintings in Udaipur, what's important is building a cohesive court culture. Hanging out with your buddies, praising them when they do the right thing. Yeah, they're expressing like Rajput qualities of chivalry and heroism and animal killing and all of that. And they're also, and we don't have this in Jaipur in any way to the same extent, they're also constantly praising their city and the water structures that they've built. We have, sorry I didn't show you, a painting of a 2-night elephant fight.
Lots of elephant fights.
Yes, they do like training. They're training their elephants for war. So this painting takes place on a flat land, it's a suburb now of Udaipur, called Sobhagpur. And there are 15 wells and water structures in the painting. And a professor at Georgetown University who works on water harvesting and ecology in India gave that painting to his students as a midterm, and they figured out the water level. The painting's 200 years old. So there's an enormous amount of information, like local feel of place. And it hadn't been recognized before because it didn't follow like Western ways of depicting the local.
And answer that question about the relationship of Udaipur painting to the satellite courts also in Udaipur. I mean, the most famous, obviously, Devgar, where we have Jogga and those other extraordinary artists, only 20 miles away. Are they coming in? Do people send their artists out to go and paint for other families, or are they very much living at home and learning from?
I feel strongly that, just like Choka comes to the Udaipur court and works in Devgar, that these artists are moving around and painting for multiple clients. I mean, they're painting for the nobility. So
we get that in Delhi painting. Ghulam Ali Khan at the same sort of period, or maybe a tiny bit later, is based in Delhi, and he has his Delhi studio, and his family are working there, and there's Mazhar Ali Khan, and there's Fateh Ali Khan, and all the others. But he goes out to Alwar, and he spends a year in Alwar and does a whole lot of stuff, and then he comes back. He's lent by presumably the Maharaja asked for him to come and stay, and then he goes out to the Skinner, and works for the Skinners.
So I think those artists are going up, but also those artists they're clearly getting paintings from Delhi. They're cataloging them, they're cataloged as Dili paintings, and they're copying them. So we have a whole bunch of paintings from Udaipur, say of Aurangzeb and other Mughal rulers. And Udaipur produced volume. Like, there are thousands and thousands of paintings and photographs that remain in the Udaipur Royal Collection today. So they did everything. I mean, we focused on the large paintings about Bhava, but you could also find really, I'm trying to think of something that would be unusual. Oh, the illustrated Mulado Piazza, have you seen that? Yeah. It's a really funny book. It's like a humorous book of Persian poems. So they're doing everything.
And another thing I'm always interested by, and it's counterintuitive in modern India, because we now segregate Islam and Hinduism apart from each other. So many of these Rajput courts have Muslims working often in devotional arts. So tonight at the Writers' Ball, we'll have a whole load of Manganyas who are Muslims, but who for generations have sung Hindu bhajans and Hindu devotional music. Likewise, one of the greatest of all the Mewar books is the the Mewar Ramayana, painted by a Muslim artist. Yeah. How many of these artists painting for the Maharaja are of Muslim background?
Some, a couple. I mean, not that many, but definitely some. I mean, that's one of the real challenges of living in this world in which we live. Because if we go back and look at Mughal and Rajput painting, or in Pahari for that matter, there's an elite world that's enormously connected. You know, when you think about Jahangir writing verses in like Braj Bhasha, or Abdurrahim was Akbar's Khani Khanan, so an important general and vizier, who also wrote poetry in Persian. He translated the Babarnama, and he's the Hindi poet Rahim. So,
but is buried in this beautifully restored tomb in Nizamuddin. He's buried in Nizamuddin in the tomb that the Aga Khan has just beautifully restored.
So the scholarship or the history that we've received like splits Abdurrahim into two people. I didn't find out he was one person until about 5 years ago, and we have his Ramayana in the National Museum.
Yeah. And finally, do you think there's any other court which obsesses about its own architectural look at the center of everything as much as Udaipur does? All those pictures have those same white courtyards and those white buildings, and they're there very recognizably as the background to often quite diverse subjects. If, you know,
Yeah.
a great holy picture with those famous sprays of pink color rising up, but there in the background is the White Palace. Is there a parallel for that anywhere else?
No, they're unique. And it's not only the palaces, it's also the landscapes, like every specific landscape and place. We match them, or I match them, by using Google Earth. You would just keep looking and looking until you would find the place. And so there's an attentiveness to the local and the surrounding, painted in a way that their viewers could recognize in order to create that sort of Bhava experience and memory.
That's quite like one of those Flemish city-states or something, where again the birth or the visit to the Magi or the crucifixion is taking place in Ghent or in Bruges. In that sense.
Yeah, that happens in every painting court that I know, Pahari and Rajput. Everybody brings Krishna home to their own landscape, makes the gods present. And it does have that double effect of Krishna's really here, this place is wonderful, and it
It's
makes
a sacred land.
wonderful. Yeah.
On that note, I think please a big round of applause. We'll open it up to questions.
Have any questions?
At the back here, there's two. Can we have there's two hands at the back. Can we have the microphones over there?
Yeah, wonderful session. So nowadays in paintings and in art, there's a lot of focus on the self, knowing thyself. But in Rajasthani paintings, a lot of focus was on the external world, and a lot of painters did not even sign their name, maybe except for Kota and somewhat. So what do you think about this idea of anonymity and the focus on external world? Or do you think that there were some self-referential paintings at that time?
What do I think about the focus on the external world? I think, if I heard the whole question, I think that here there are real reasons to celebrate Udaipur, to make it a place that is beloved by the elite who live there, to create a sense of cohesion. I mean, how do people come to love a specific city or their hometown? I'm a New Yorker, so we have all these strategies, you know, from childhood that tell us that New York is really a very splendid city. And that's what's happening in these large paintings. To create that affection, it is the world in which we live, and in which we gain great pleasure, and in which we have friendships.
Very nice. In the front here, please.
I want to know if you have any reference of the portraits of common people were done in Udaipur, because I'm fortunate enough to show you a few images this morning. So I want to know if you have any reference by any other artist, like the portraits I shown you this morning were done by Shivlal. So any other artist, or you can use.
Okay.
Tell me.
This man has found an album of drawings by a specific Udaipur artist in which people from all different classes are named, which will help us greatly in beginning to get the histories of common people, for lack of a better word, who are in these paintings. But we do have these extraordinarily long inscriptions on the back, so we know when an artist is in the painting. We sometimes know the name of dancers, and we certainly know the name of every Thakur, every nobleman, because creating those bonds is politically very important. So we always will know the name of every Thakur, and the color of the horse that they rode in on. But occasionally other people enter into the written inscriptions. As it is, what we mostly have are paintings. Paintings, there are beals, there are hunters, there are dancers, there are village women, there are dobbies. So beginning to figure out, one of the challenges with Indian painting is that we rarely have records. So Udaipur gives us a lot of records, and the sketchbook that you found gives us more information. So we should be able to hook together those people that are identified in those drawings. The notion in art history is a discipline that was largely set up in the West, at a moment when the West hyper-privileged the notion of genius attached to the names of particular people. So I'm not saying that the only thing to do is to find out the names of people, but it's a way in which we can reconstruct or begin to contextualize or find out about the lives of the hundreds of common people that populate these paintings, like that.
But you do get in Jahangir's diaries this sensation that he's taking great pleasure, and he boasts that he can spot the hand of any of his artists, and that even if several artists work on a painting, he says, I can see that who's contributed what.
Jahangir does say that, and it could be possible. It's probably true. 2027, it's going to be the big year of Jahangir.
Navina's show.
And at the Ashmolean. And I think we'll do something with ours, because it's his death anniversary. So Jahangir is someone who promoted himself as a connoisseur, but that's not so different from Indian kings, because it's a really long history. Back to the Kama Sutra, in which to be an urbane and educated person, you should appreciate art. So maybe we taught it to the Mughals.
For those that don't know that lovely story, you tell the story which Stella Cranbrook opens with, about how an artist, the king's trying to understand art, and he's told that first of all he has to understand dance. Could you give that story?
No, you can tell it better.
And it's talking about the interconnectedness of the different arts. Sure. And so I think he asked the sage Markandeya, I think it's aimed at. And the sage says, sir, for you to understand painting, you have first to understand dance. And then he goes on, and then to understand dance, you have to understand music. And the long litany of the connected arts comes through.
Okay. Can I tell you the story that I like the best? Okay. This is the great B.N. Goswami told this story. It's a story told by Pahardi painters, and it tells you everything you need to know about how to look at an Indian painting. So in this story, a Raja realizes that it's his wife's birthday the following day, the queen, and he wants to give her a present, so he decides to commission a portrait of the queen. He calls in a painter, he says, quick, please make a portrait of my wife. Of course, the painter does not see the wife because elite women are living in Parda, they're not seen by men. But he goes home and he says, he makes a beautiful portrait, and he calls on all of the poetic tropes or lakshanas that are used to convey beauty in Indian art, again, over 2,000 years. So he makes a picture of the Rani, and he makes her eyes like lotuses, and her nose like a parrot beak, and her lips like red bimba fruit, all of this. He's rushing, though. It's like an overnight commission. So at the end of the night, accidentally, a spot of black paint falls off of his brush and onto the thigh of the Rani. Oh, so a spot of black paint falls off his brush and lands on the thigh of the Rani. But he thinks, I have to hand it in, it's due. So he rushes and he gives it in, hoping that the king won't know. But the king is a rasika, and he knows how to look at a painting. So he starts, from the top, and he looks down, and he sees the eyes like lotuses, the nose like a parrot beak, the lips like red bimba fruit. Everything's going great. This is a beautiful Rani. This is his wife. Then he sees the black spot. Now he knows that his wife has a mole on her thigh. So he throws the painter into jail and says, "You will die at dawn." But luckily, because the goddess is there, inspiring painter, she appears in a vision to the Raja and says, "It is I who made the drop of black paint fall on the thigh of your Rani because I wanted it to look like her more." And then the painter is not killed, and that's the end of the story. But that's how you're supposed to look, and I hope you do it next time you're at a museum or at home.
Ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation.